So, for 4 parts now, we've dug through a mountain of data to understand one of the biggest religious shifts happening today. And now, we finally get to the most important question of all. What does all this evidence say we should actually do about it?
We've been through 5 of these explainers.
We've looked at hundreds of data points from the best research groups out there.
And really, it's all been funneling down to this one single critical question.
What does the research say actually works? You know, if a church or a ministry or even just a family wants to build a faith in the next generation that actually lasts, where does the evidence point us?
Well, let's break it down. We're going to walk through 6 strategies that come directly from the recurring patterns in all this data. This isn't about looking back with nostalgia, and it's definitely not guesswork. This is about following the evidence. Let's get into it.
All right, first up, the data is just absolutely clear on this. The best window for forming a durable faith opens way, way before college. And honestly, it starts to close a lot faster than most of us think.
I mean, just look at this number from Pew Research. 85% of people who change what they believe, they do it before they even turn 30. That should create a massive sense of urgency for us. Waiting until someone's an adult to get serious about faith formation, it's kind of like trying to start a race after most people have already crossed the finish line.
And here's the key. That early formation has to have some real substance. Research from places like Lifeway shows that young people who get equipped with real theological and biblical knowledge before they turn 18 have way higher retention rates. We're talking about stuff like catechesis, scripture memory, and discipleship that isn't afraid to go deep. The whole point is building a strong foundation before the storms hit.
And that leads us right into our second strategy. Because let's face it, a shallow faith just does not survive sophisticated challenges. The data is pretty clear. Intellectual preparation is totally non-negotiable. If you look across multiple major studies from Pew and PRRI, the #1 reason people say they leave is simply a loss of belief. Now, don't get me wrong, feeling hurt or disconnected, those are obviously huge factors, and you can see them right here. But at the very core, for nearly half of those who walk away, the problem is intellectual. They just stop believing it's true.
And this really gets at what some researchers call the overmatched believer problem. Picture this. A young person leaves home with a faith built on simple Sunday school stories and then runs head first into university-level skepticism. They need to have already wrestled with the tough stuff like the reliability of the Bible, the problem of evil, the whole science and faith conversation in a safe place before they face it in a hostile one.
Okay, let's jump to our third strategy. This one shifts our focus from this idea of active rebellion to something that's way more common and, maybe even more dangerous: the quiet drift.
This stat from Lifeway Research is honestly one of the most surprising things I've seen. We all have this image of the angry teenager storming out of the church, right? But the reality? Almost 3/4 of young people who leave didn't plan to. They just got busy, they moved for school, they slowly disconnected, and a lot of the time, nobody even noticed. The real enemy isn't revolt, it's drift.
And that brings us to this incredibly powerful point. Keeping someone connected isn't always about winning a debate or having the coolest program. Sometimes it's about relationships. It's about noticing when someone's gone and just reaching out before that absence becomes who they are. It's proving that they're missed.
And speaking of relationships, that's a perfect lead-in to our 4th evidence-based strategy, which might just be one of the most powerful predictors of long-term faith.
So researchers at the Fuller Youth Institute came up with this great term, sticky faith, to describe the kind of faith that actually lasts past high school. After studying tons of students, they found one of the absolute strongest predictors was having meaningful relationships with at least 5 adults in the church. Not just their parents or the youth pastor, but a whole web of older believers who know their name. It suggests that youth ministries that silo students away from the rest of the church might actually be hurting their long-term faith.
All right, on to our 5th strategy. And this one takes some real courage. Churches have to be willing to talk about the things that are actually on people's minds today. According to research from PRRI and Barna, the big flashpoints driving people away now are conflicts over sexuality and identity, experiences of religious trauma, and just this deep distrust of institutions because of hypocrisy. For example, PRRI's data shows that the number of people citing issues around LGBTQ treatment as a reason for leaving has absolutely skyrocketed. Avoiding these topics doesn't make them vanish. It just proves that the church isn't relevant to people's real lives.
So here's the bottom line. Creating a culture where it's safe to ask hard questions and even express doubt is a retention strategy. Barna's research has been showing for years that a doubtless church culture actually pushes people away. Honesty, even when it's really uncomfortable, is what builds trust.
And for our final strategy, all the research brings us right back to where everything really begins, the home. This data from Pew is just staggering. Look at the difference here. Young adults who were raised in homes where faith is an active, practiced thing, they retain their faith at a rate of 82%. But for those from homes where there's very little religious practice, that number plummets to just 47%. The church's role is absolutely critical, but it's mainly to support and equip the family, because the home is, and always will be, the primary incubator of faith. So there you have it, 6 strategies. And all of them are grounded in patterns that keep showing up again and again across thousands of interviews and surveys done by the top research groups out there: Pew, Barna, PRRI, and Lifeway.
Now look, of course this isn't some simple, guaranteed formula you can just plug in. People are way more complicated than that. But it is a map. It shows us a clear direction based on the best evidence we have for how to navigate this really challenging landscape.
And that really just leaves us with one final question. When you have an entire generation that seems to be drifting, maps matter. So who do you know, a pastor, a youth leader, a parent, a friend, who needs to see this map? Because changing the future, it almost always begins with someone having the courage to actually face the data.